All right, this is Stephen Frost tweeting about Wildstar. Breathing deep and pours a glass of scotch at 6 a.m. It's time for another rant. This one's going to be messy. It's got a history lesson. It's nuanced, long-winded, and it's cautionary tale about being the face of a game and interacting with the community. Let's talk hardcore. Hardcore! Hardcore! First, some context. On Wildstar, I was a design producer. If you want an in-depth definition of what a producer does, I defined it in another thread weeks ago. TLDR, I work for teams to refine process and get stuff done. I did not make creative calls. There's this thread. When I got to Carbine in 2010, the game we were working on was not Wildstar. I was at Carbine for 4 years. It was another MMO that had some of the assets, but not the same story or gameplay direction. The studio itself started in 2005, so it had been pre-pro for a while. I agree with that. I remember when I first saw Wildstar stuff, I was like, man, this game looks far along. When we finally started settling on the direction after some shifts in management and the design team, we started making what became Northern Wilds. This would eventually turn into what we showed at Gamescom 2011. There was pressure to announce, so we did. It was received really well by press and fans. The team got their batteries recharged after some folks were toiling for years with no way to show off what we were making. A lot of us went to Germany to see the debut, and it was one of the most fun trips I've ever had. For the trip, we needed to, make the rest of the game. So we got into doing that for a long while. We didn't have much to show. We were hardworking to make classes, zone, housing. We were grinding to get stuff done, not crunching, just focusing. During that period, there was a lack of stuff to show because it was a work in progress. But it started to take shape. On the dev team, there were some people who were getting anxious that we were not showing off how cool the game was. Of course. This started what became a big part of our marketing on the dev team. So the dev team was talking about how they weren't showing how cool the game was. An animator, VFX artist, and a quest designer talked about putting together some kind of dev videos to show our stuff off and speaking a language that was more earnest and funny and show why we were excited. The dev speaks of cinematics were born of these discussions. That makes sense. The first dev speak we made was on movement. We showed it internally and people loved it. We were given the green light to make more while we were doing our other jobs. Eventually that became full-time work for the group that originally pitched it, except for me staying in prod. The housing dev speak debuted at PAX East 2013 and people really liked it. Dude, I love housing in this game. Holy crap. They had a panel in a larger auditorium and it was filled. We were blown away by this and I expect such a turnout of interest. Because of this response, we started cranking out these dev speaks. I remember these like yesterday. They continued to get positive reception. We talked about classes, housing, PvP, etc. We had a massive game. I remember the Twitch streams actually. We had a massive game. We were making tons of features and Sips Whiskey came the raids video. And this is what people remember. They don't remember all the stuff he just said. All people remember is hardcore, hardcore, hardcore. We were trying to make something that was specific to the rating audience and make it over the top. Instead, we contributed to what I've come to learn the past few years is a lightning rod for arguments. Difficulty discourse. Interesting. I didn't help this in any way with my own tweets. Difficulty discourse. I'm thinking from management, and I'm not naming names because it doesn't matter, was that if we made rating content for people that really put time into rating in other games, that they'd enjoy our content and they'd stay sub because the time needed to put into it. The other part of the thing was if hardcore were happy, then they'd become evangelists for the game and tell others about it. But this was one part of the game. We had PvE quests, housing, crafting, an auction house, PvP, ship hands, adventures. There's a ton of stuff for launching an MMO, all made by different teams. That means we don't allocate more resources to rating at the cost of the other content. I see a ton of comments saying that the marketing only catered to the hardcore. Yeah. Like I said, that's what people remember. Which if we look at the dev speaks, that is the case. Exactly. Where I messed up, oh man, I like this already because he's already admitting fault. That's rare. Was engaging in that discussion too often. I did push other content on Twitter or in interviews. That's true. I've also changed my attitude over the years to be less snarky about responses, which again, I didn't do myself any favors. It got retweets and attention on the game, but maybe not the kind it deserved. Now, the reason I gave a history lesson at the beginning of the type of the game we're making was certainly more from the 2005 period mixed with the more modern art and combat aesthetics. This was the investment that took a long time, which means the core likely didn't evolve enough. So as a guy who was in interviews, live streams, and development videos, but doesn't actually have a creative say over the stuff I'm talking about, let me tell you I had some stressful moments during the last months of the project. You can see it on streams. I was pretty burned out. I also wanted to evolve my role to become more of a voice in the creative process, but that wasn't on the table. I got an opportunity with Amazon and I took it. Oh, he's at Amazon now. Really? Game director at Deck 9. I guess he's not anymore. However, I was not, leaving it was hard for me. I felt incredibly guilty, like I was letting down members of the team and the community. However, I was not in a good place mentally, high blood pressure, exhausted, and creatively, I felt stunned. If you watched the last stream I was on, I was gutted. So what I learned from all this, don't burn yourself out trying too hard to do 3 jobs, especially getting paid 50. What? Please tell me this guy had good benefits. You are a game producer making $55K a year. Don't be snarky for clicks. If you're going to be the face of a game, make sure you can actually change the development course. If you're asking me what kind of MMO I want to make now, it'd be much along the lines of Valheim or Warframe, with Mortifa and brutality-like tone. Nah. Stuff that forces communication. Oh, okay, I like that. Engaging combat. I like that. And that anyone can play together and not be gated by time invested. See, you know, MMOs require you to play them. If you make them too easy, the game's not going to last very long. You have to put the time in, Pace Ninja. You really have to put the time in. That's what makes MMOs MMOs. It's that grind. You have to put the time in. And if you keep telling people that you can do this without putting the time in, it's not going to be good for your game. You should do what, I mean, I know I sound like a broken record, but Final Fantasy 14, they make you put time in, but they respect the time you put in by giving you appropriate rewards. But you still got to grind. Oh, you still got to grind in 14. Oh, yes, you do. You have to grind. But you get good rewards. So it's fulfilling and it's rewarding, and it makes you feel good about doing it. And it makes it feel like you're not wasting your time. So I hope, you know, this may be just me looking too much into this, but I was with you to that sentence. Like, not be gated by time invested. Well, you need to put time in. Perhaps I'll do another rant on the kind of MMO I want to make and play, but that's for another time. Also, if you made this far, thanks for listening. You know what? That was a good thread. I learned a little bit. Because I followed this game pretty much throughout its entire dev cycle. All the way from the initial launch, announcement to launch to post-launch. And I kind of waned after a while. When he left, I think that was a really low point because he was the face of the game. But I learned a little bit there. Like this difficulty discourse term. I was like, oh, okay. And I always concluded that they marketed a lot towards, they did, and I think they did. They marketed a lot towards, especially towards the end, towards a hardcore community. But the people that claimed they wanted hardcore didn't want hardcore. They just wanted to sound hardcore. Because everybody wants to seem hardcore. Pop's collar, I'm hardcore. But when they had to do attunements, they left. And they were even told in the beginning that attunements were going to be a thing. People always talk about how they didn't like attunements in WoW. But they brought attunements back and they were like, oh, hardcore, you attunements are back. Well, I'm out of here. And the game has so much more, man. Like, I'll be honest with you, the questing was boring. But I didn't really get the game for the questing. PvP was very fun. Very fun. That's the most I've ever PvP'd in any MMO. And the housing is second to none. I haven't seen a housing system better than Wildstar's yet. I haven't seen it. I have not seen it. Nobody's done one better than me. My favorite thing about Wildstar, every time I talk about it, was the housing. It had nothing to do with raids, had nothing to do with hardcore, had nothing to do with the PvE. It was the housing. The housing was insane. Like, whoever came up with that just needs to make a housing game. Ugh. I miss it so much. And PvP was a lot of fun. A lot of fun. That was like all I did. Like at the end of my time playing the game, all I did was PvP and work on my house. That was it. So yeah, good thread by Stephen Frost. If you follow Wildstar, you probably recognize his face. He was in a lot of the streams, the dev streams that he mentions here. This is a good insight as to why he thinks, things went awry. I personally think, the game could do a lot of other things right. Like promote housing. Because they did have some streams where they showed up, like on a lot of their videos that they put out, they would have these, kind of like what Warframe does with their dojos. They would show off some houses, and I'm telling you, man, it was just like, that's Wildstar? And people would sub right then. They were like, you can do this in Wildstar? Like, yeah. And they would go, I'm buying it. if they would have promoted that more, I think the game would have lasted a little bit longer than what it did. It probably wouldn't have saved the game. But there was too much emphasis from him, he even admits to it, on what he did on social media and what got the attention of the media, of journalists and gaming journalists. And he was the face of that. And it was all about the hardcore. All about the hardcore. So good thread, man. I like that he took responsibility too. That gives me a lot of respect for him. He was like, the things I did wrong, this was my fault, blah, blah, blah. When you see that, you know, it makes it easier to ingest. So that's Stephen Frost, man. Good thread.